Hey boys and girls, let's talk commas. So sorry for the shadow, it's the way my kitchen set up the lights behind me. But here is the lesson on page 170. You can look here, you can follow along in your book. But there are lots of different rules for ways to use commas. In this particular lesson, commas part 1, you're going to learn about using commas to separate groups of words so they're easier to read and understand. You're also going to learn that a comma is used before the coordinating conjunction and or but to separate two sentences joined into a compound sentence. So we learned about compound sentences when we were talking about sentences at the beginning of the school year. Commas are used in compound sentences, but not in compound sentence parts. So thinking about what that means, compound sentences are two sentences put together, and they are joined by those words that we just said, and, or but, with a comma just before that. So an example of that is, Petra raised her hand, but John shouted the answer. So those are two separate sentences that we were able to combine with comma but. What they mean by compound sentence parts is, for example, like a compound subject or a compound predicate. Compound subject would be two people doing one thing. So Brian and Bailey went for a walk. That's two people who did one thing. Or one person doing two things. Bailey ran and jumped in the driveway. So she ran and jumped in the driveway. We would not use commas in those types of sentences because those are compound parts, not complete compound sentences. Okay, so we've got 3 sentences here. We practiced our Spanish and hoped to use it in Mexico. Elizabeth bought postcards and her sister bought souvenirs. I packed my suitcase and Dad loaded it into the van. Which of these uses this comma correctly? A, B, or C? Initially I looked at it and I was like, oh, it's A. But no, it's not A. Why? Because A does not have a second subject in the second part of the sentence. It is actually C. Because we have comma and then a new subject. Remember that a compound sentence has 2 subjects and 2 verbs. They're 2 separate thoughts, 2 separate complete thoughts. Okay, so that's the first comma rule. And the next comma rule is that we use commas to separate groups of words, like words in what we call a series. When you're listing things in a sentence, you are going to use a comma in between each. Usually a series is 3 or more things. So the definition here is 3 or more words or groups of words of the same kind written one after another and called a series. Often part of the series is connected by the coordinating conjunction and or. Commas are used to separate words in a series. So here, Anna, Christopher, and Otto raised their hands. So we're going to put a comma in between each of those names, including right before the conjunction. Okay, so now here are some sentences, and we're going to look to see which one is using them correctly. Salzburg, Barcelona, and Galway are my favorite European cities. Krista wanted to hike, ski, and shop on her vacation. I took pictures of the coastline, mountains, and plants. Which one do you think it is? If you said C, you are correct. The words coastline, mountains, and plants are in a series, and a comma comes before the coordinating conjunction and. All right, so I'm going to keep my camera over here on the lesson, and I'm going to read the sentences on 171 and tell you the correct answers. But I'm going to give you a minute to think about where, or not a minute, but a couple seconds to think about where the commas should go in these sentences. So number 1, for some time, the family had wanted to go to England, and they planned their trip carefully. So those are 2 complete thoughts with 2 subjects, the family and they. So I'm going to put my comma after England right before and. Number 2, she packed an umbrella, a raincoat, and a waterproof hat. So if you're thinking that's a series, you are correct. I'm going to put my comma after umbrella and after raincoat, so 2 commas in that sentence. Let's see, number 3, Anna didn't forget her boots, and she reminded Finn to bring his. Okay, so again, those are 2 sentences with 2 complete thoughts because they have 2 subjects. So it's going to go 1 comma after boots and before and. We want to visit London, Oxford, and Cambridge. Again, that's a list, so between London and Oxford and between Oxford and. Number 5, the tourists visited Big Ben, Buckingham Palace, and Windsor Castle. I like the theme of this one, it's London. So again, if you're thinking that's a list, you are correct. It's going to be between Ben and Buckingham, between Palace and. And we'll do 1 more. We tried to visit the British Museum, but it was closed. So what are your thoughts there? Think in your head. If you're thinking that that is a compound sentence because it has 2 subjects, we and it, you are correct. And you should put your comma between museum and but. Okay. The sentences on the bottom, I can kind of look at those because the answers are on the side. We did not have good weather, but we still had a good time. That's a compound sentence, so you're going to go between weather and but. We had fog, rain, and sleet on the same day. The comma between fog and rain is correct, but the comma next to sleet is not. You should move it over, and it should be next to rain. We traveled by taxi, bus, and boat. We should have a comma between taxi and bus. Highlights of our trip were Buckingham Palace, Big Ben, and the Tower of London. So this one is correct right here. We should have 1 between Ben and and. The London Eye is like a giant Ferris wheel, but its cars are big glass booths. So this is a compound sentence because it's got London Eye and it as its subjects. So it would be wheel, comma, but. And the last one, Josephine, Audrey, and Lily Ann enjoyed the Shakespeare play, but Emily liked watching the soccer games more. So this has a little of both. Josephine and Audrey, that is correct there. We need 1 next to Audrey and. We would take this one away here, and then we would add 1 between play and but, because this is also a compound sentence. All right, you are going to give this a try, practicing putting commas in sentences of your own. Enjoy!